The following program is a production of KSPS Public Television and is made possible by the Friends of Seven.
We got in New York about 10 o'clock in the morning, June the 10th, 1940. About 11 o'clock, New York time, Italy went to war. And Mussolini made a speech. He said it's going to be a short war, you know. And one officer, he was on top of the deck, and he shook his head. He said, fellas, this is going to be a long, long trip. And by God, it was a long trip, believe me.
In 1930s Europe, a severe depression gave rise to Germany's Adolf Hitler, who promised to restore economic health through ethnic purity and expansion of German borders. In Italy, the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini tightened his hold over the country's economy and pursued conquests in Africa. But despite the Berlin-Rome axis and the fascist commandment that Mussolini is always right, Il Duce could not deliver prosperity. One avenue for escaping poverty, the shipping industry. Boys as young as 14 jumped at the chance to travel, delivering cargo and passengers around the world. But in June of 1940, Benito Mussolini joined Hitler's war on Europe. Now it was too risky for Italian boats to sail. 28 Italian ships received orders to drop anchor and remain within the safety of America's neutral harbors.
We ended up to Norfolk, Virginia, and we stayed there 11 months. For 11 months, the ship in the boat and cleaning and painted the outside, you know, keep up the boat. We had 14 cats and 1 pig on the boat. For some reason, somebody gave us a little pig, and then we got so big that it was our pet, you know.
By day, crews on the Italian ships appeared to be fixing up the vessels. But secretly, the Italians prepared lest the Americans decide to take over the fleet.
But then at night, they used to bust the machinery and dump them in the ocean. And then when the American come in, that ship didn't run. Yeah.
In March of 1941, President Franklin Roosevelt signed into law his Lend-Lease program, which allowed the United States to provide armaments and other aid short of manpower to Britain. Less than 3 weeks later, the United States Coast Guard seized the Italian ships and all their crew, as well as 2 German ships and the men on board. During the time his ship was docked in New Jersey, John Pelly spent most weekends with family friends living nearby. When he returned to the ship late on March 30th, the rest of the crew was gone, and U.S. Coast Guardsmen were aboard.
He said, what do you want? I said, well, so-and-so, I belong to this boat. I said, I'd like to get my clothes. He put the bayonet right in my stomach. And he said, well, you come back tomorrow. But I don't want to argue with him because I think he was pretty sharp, you know. So I went downstairs, and the other guy said, well, you go with me. I said, oh, no, I don't. So I started walking towards the car. So he reached over. I was about 90 pounds altogether, maybe. I never forget. He lifted me up to the ground, and he threw me in the towboat, straight for Ellis Island. And, you know, I couldn't change clothes for over a month. I had to wear the same underwear, same T-shirt, because I didn't have anything. The only way I can change the clothes, I had to take them out at night, wash them, put my pants back up again, and that's it. I didn't have no clothes whatsoever. 53 years, I'm still wet for my clothes, because I never got a chance to go back there.
Life magazine hailed the action as a, quote, bloodless victory. Legal or not, the magazine noted, it was a historic act, the first use of U.S. armed force in World War II.
Well, that's what he got me more than anything else, you know. The United States was in war, you know. When 10 months before this country went to war, they lock us up, you know, 10 months before, and then if they say, well, this is war.
The Italian press cried foul, but in the United States, said Life, public reaction was one of general satisfaction mingled with mild vexation that the thing had not been done sooner.
While we were not yet at war with Italy or with Germany, there was certainly a feeling that war was on the horizon, war was looming, and so any number of seamen who might be kept or interned would be that many fewer potential soldiers or sailors on the other side.
An FBI investigation revealed that 20 of 28 Italian ships had been sabotaged. The United States expressed outrage and expelled the Italian naval attaché. 3 days after the ship's seizures, the Italian ambassador met with Assistant Secretary of State Breckinridge Long.
I remarked that their action in destroying the engines constituted an illegal act. I also added that we had had no intention to expropriate either the Italian or German vessels. For the crews to act in such a manner and seriously damage valuable vessels was inexplicable and fantastic.
The Italian government's suspicions proved right. Subsequently, Congress allowed all 28 of the Italian ships to be used in the Allied effort. About 200 Italians were convicted for their part in the sabotage and jailed. Most of the rest were simply charged with overstaying the 60-day limit allowed seamen. The U.S. government also rounded up several dozen more Italian aliens who'd come to work at the New York World's Fair and overstayed their visas.
You betcha I was surprised, yeah. Me put in jail, I don't know for what, you know. I figure out maybe it was the American way. A good experience, yeah.
Alfredo Cipolato eventually was sent to Ellis Island, where he joined more than 1,000 of his countrymen.
Every day, they were interrogation, you know. They want to know who you are, you know, this and that. The first thing he asked me, say, you speak English? I said, no. He said, you speak Greek? I said, no. He said, you will pretty soon. But Greasy was kicking the heck out of Italy those days, you know? So I got up, I grabbed a chair, I was gonna hit him in the head with a chair, and I told him, I said, I ain't gonna talk to you no more, you know, and I left. The first Easter we spent, it was on Ellis Island. You know, Easter, with our religion and in Italy, you know, is a big day, believe me, it's a big day. And you know what we had the Easter Sunday? Hot dog and sauerkraut. You know, and I was 16 years old, and I started crying like a baby because, like I say, it was a big deal.
By the end of April, the Immigration and Naturalization Service had decided to move the men to Fort Missoula, Montana, an inactive Army post isolated in the Rocky Mountains, far from security risks. In May, the first group of Italian detainees were put on special trains headed west.
But there was a bar in the train, and they were traveling like a bunch of sheep because he didn't have no bed to sleep or anything. We stayed about 3 or 4 days in the train.
Ironically, the Italians were safer behind bars in the United States than they were as free men in Italy.
The farther I was going from the war, the better it was.
So when we arrived over here, well, this was a summer. After you spend like 3 weeks in jail and maybe 3 more weeks in Ellis Island, and you arrive in Missoula, that to me this was a paradise.
May 9, 1941, the Missoula Sentinel. 125 grinning, chattering Italian seamen sent from Ellis Island for internment at Fort Missoula arrived early this morning, cheerfully accepting the post as their home for the duration of the war. "Que bella vista," the men exclaimed as they pulled into their new home. Translation, what a beautiful view. The name stuck. Bella Vista it was.
Was the best 2.5 years of my life because I rested. I was so wore out when I went in there. when I left Italy, I was so wore out. I don't say why. And everything, and then when I went over there in the camp, and I just rested.
Umberto Benedetti was among the first group to arrive at the fort. An artisan who had worked on the luxury liner Conte Biancomano, he helped build the fence that would surround him and his countrymen for the next 2.5 years. Years later, Benedetti wrote and self-published a book about Fort Missoula, in which he defended the United States and emphasized that the Italians were not prisoners of war.
And all the people, they ask me, oh, you were a prisoner of Fort Missoula. Oh, you were. I felt very bad about that because we're not
So I decided to print the book, black and white, to show what we did.
What they did was organize themselves into a self-governed and nearly self-sufficient community. The U.S. government provided clothes and food and medical attention and supplies. Over 1,000 Italians provided the ingenuity, the discipline, and the labor.
We had everything ourselves. We had a doctor, we had a priest, we had shoemakers, we had barbers. You name it, we had it. No outside help in the camp.
Teacher, everything.
Everything was done, laundry, everything done ourselves.
At each of the four corners stood a 60-foot guard tower with an armed guard inside. Several guards on horseback patrolled outside the 32-acre compound. Apparently fearing trouble, the Immigration and Naturalization Service ordered grenades, tear gas, and gas masks. The fears were soon put to rest.
Down over there, I used to sleep. One day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. I think it was some place over there for a while. And after, the first I was on the other side, because I do remember when I used to open the window, I used to have the porch, you know. I used to sing, and they used to say, "What do you sing?" I said, "Well, make it the best."
Dozens of men shared the large dormitory-style rooms until they built wooden barracks to house themselves, leaving the older buildings for the officers.
In the morning, about 8 o'clock, we used to be all in line here, you know, and the guy, the sergeant used to have one of those things, used to do, tick, 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 check if everybody was, yeah. We used to do twice every day.
But no one was ever missing.
Nobody was escaped. At 12 o'clock, time to eat, everybody was coming back. Food was too good.
And plentiful as well. They were eating round steak when I couldn't get hamburger, complained one border guard. Prepared by highly skilled chefs from the New York World's Fair and the Conte Biancamano, food was one way the Italians could make themselves feel at home.
Good food. But then they started protesting because they didn't have spaghetti and sauce, you know, the Italian, and then they ruined everything.
It was food that caused one of the only recorded incidents of violence at Bella Vista. The Italians were used to olive oil and butter, but the U.S. government also expected them to use beef fat. On July 19, 1941, conflict erupted when a few Italian seamen spotted 400 pounds of beef suet in their kitchen. When the Italian butcher showed up, the angry seaman struck him twice in the head and shoulders with a large piece of suet, and then dumped the rest. Camp officials called out their troops. Firefighters had to respond when a tear gas bomb exploded, apparently accidentally, setting fire to one of the guards' vehicles.
I never forget that. Then they blow the siren, and all that. Them in Missoula was all upset, you know. They thought it was a kind of revolution there.
The fiasco brought on an investigation by the FBI, which labeled it a mass revolt. A chagrined P.R. McLaughlin, assistant supervisor for alien detentions at Fort Missoula, set the record straight. But he added that he'd learned his lesson. Wrote McLaughlin, "I now know that little importance should be attached to arm waving." Each of the men reported to his commanding officer and had a duty necessary to the day-to-day operation. But these unpaid jobs required only minimal effort, leaving plenty of time for cultural and recreational pursuits. The men leveled a playing field and organized bocce ball and soccer tournaments. The merchant seamen versus the semi-professional team off the Conte Biancamano.
Like I say, in 2.5 years, I don't think we only won once. We all got beat the heck out of us.
Oh yeah, we used to have this maestro. He was very, very good, yeah.
As one of Italy's finest luxury liners with a staff of 500, the Conte Biancamano had employed skilled musicians and dramatists. And there were acclaimed musicians from the New York World's Fair as well.
Every Saturday we used to give a concert or a comedy or a drama. And in the comedy I used to play a woman part, because everybody else was scared to play woman.
The first summer, the internees performed several shows for Missoula audiences, engendering goodwill by donating 10% of ticket sales to the Missoula Iron Lung Foundation. The elite musicians from the New York World's Fair gave private concerts and even lessons in and around Missoula throughout the war. Music was a constant at the camp, especially Sundays, when the band gave an outdoor concert. Twice a week, the camp showed free films.
Still sick and tired of listening to Bing Crosby.
Oh, yeah.
For
I used to like it.
months.
We had the radio, you know.
Some of the men kept busy making handicrafts that they sold locally. They could spend their modest income at the camp store, which sold candy and toiletries, or on popular magazines.
I sent a boat to John Crawford, you know, the actress, the model. And she sent me the picture and the tanks and everything.
Others staved off boredom with an age-old remedy, alcohol. Frank Westella worked in the camp bakery, where he watched one of the bakers take raisins and sugar meant for panettone and use them instead to make wine.
He had 20, 30-pound raisins and maybe 20, 40-pound sugar. He had the echo booze. That boy was a drunk.
And it was strong, too, because you make a wine with the sugar, it is a kill you.
The camp spokesman, Captain P.S. Salietto, described his relationship with the camp authorities as one of complete understanding and trust.
This was the best camp. I have no other feeling. As a matter of fact, I still know some other people, all the people who were a guard over there, see what I mean? And we'd say, oh, good morning, this and that, and so forth.
With the United States official entry into World War II in December 1941, the Italian status changed from detainees to enemy aliens. Yet the Missoula Sentinel reported that the Italians continued their regular routine, which at present includes repairing of dolls to be given away at the community chest toyland for underprivileged Missoula children. But later that month, several hundred Japanese arrived at the fort, the first victims of what evolved into a massive relocation campaign waged by the U.S. government against residents of Japanese descent. 1,000 Japanese and some 200 Italians, considered dangerous to national security, stayed at Fort Missoula only a short while before they were transferred to facilities in other states. Their conditions were vastly different.
They were shipped to desert areas. They were shipped to areas that were windy and windblown and where the temperatures were very cold at night and hot during the day. They went there in the late spring and summer of 1942, and it was an infinitely depressing experience. I mean, they were sent to the most desolate, out-of-the-way places imaginable. And so, of course, it was quite a contrast when the Italian seamen were sent to this beautiful area in Montana.
Boredom mixed with anxiety about their families in war-torn Italy remained the Italians' worst enemy.
I do think I check every square and the fence between all around Missoula. I don't know how many thousand was. I multiply so. And I do think I wrote down some place.
Some of the men hooked up with female pen pals, Italian-American women who wrote to comfort them. Censors read every piece of mail coming to and from the camp, often cutting out phrases or even rejecting entire letters because of cultural misunderstandings. By December of 1942, 6,000 letters written by the Italians to their families had been rejected.
My mother used to send me to the Red Cross, you know, a letter. They said she was worried about me. I said, and so I write, what you worried that we in this camp, I said, we do the life of the chicken. You know what the chicken do? Eat and go to sleep. Eat and go to sleep. You know, they send them back.
The stress of isolation began to take its toll. Dr. Frank Brown, the camp's medical officer, wrote to the Surgeon General,
in the month of December 1942, there were a total of 1,404 sick calls, plus 375 days relief in the post-hospital. Considering there are only a total of 1,227 Italian detainees, the ratio between sick calls and population is most unreasonable.
By July of that year, Brown had recorded numerous other mental disorders, which he suspected were caused by depression, worry, anxiety, and lack of activity. 3 internees had attempted suicide.
They used to tell me that you go in America, you find the money on the street. Everything was, you know, and then just like get the money with the shovel, you know. But when I ended up over here, I worked for the railroad one time, so they give me pick and shovel.
By 1943, 705 Italians, more than half of Bella Vista's original population, were paroled and working outside the camp to fill wartime labor shortages. They cleared brush for the Forest Service, cultivated and topped sugar beets, built railroads, and filled in as orderlies at area hospitals. 2 chefs cooked at Missoula's renowned Florence Hotel. Others worked as busboys and housekeepers. One group of men were taken to San Francisco to work as garbage men.
The stereotype of the Japanese was of someone who was sneaky and treacherous, and that affected the way Americans reacted. And the stereotype of the German was someone who was cold and calculating and efficient, and that stereotype affected the way Americans reacted to Germans. And the stereotype of the Italian, no more accurate than any of these other stereotypes, was of someone who was sort of easygoing and opera-loving, and these kinds of stereotypes affected the way Americans reacted. And in this case, the stereotype, if not accurate at least, was one that didn't lead Americans to behave in a vicious or hostile way.
Italy surrendered to the Allied forces in September 1943, and by 1944, Bella Vista stood empty. Most of the Italians were deported, causing enormous distress within the local female population they had romanced. The Missoula Sentinel reported that weeping, screaming women gathered at the Northern Pacific Station to say their farewells. In some cases, the newspaper reported, there were altercations, as the women learned for the first time that the Italians had given their affections to not one, but several of them. But the war raged on, and the United States desperately needed soldiers. Uncle Sam turned to the Italian internees remaining in the country. Years earlier, they'd registered for the draft according to American law. An estimated 24 former internees were either drafted or convinced to enlist.
Well, the FBI came in and said, you want to stay in this country, you better go in the Army. I said, okay. Wrapped them in the Army, so they did. I went to fight for the American. We thought to be American citizens. But then I had a heck of a time to get my citizen paper after. So what I done, I wrote to General Eisenhower, it was my commanding officer that time. He answered me back, the War Department answered me. He said, you got the right to become American citizen, I can't be born here.
During the war, the Conte Biancamano had transported American troops under the name Heritage. In 1952, after it had been repatriated to Italy, Dan Bonanini was aboard his old ship, returning home to marry his high school sweetheart.
Well, I went to work for Lydia, you know, the nightclub in Butte there. In fact, I make her famous. My specialty was ravioli and spaghetti, scallopine, big lobster tail. In fact, I'm the first one to bring the lobster tail in the state of Montana.
It's impossible to know exactly how many of the former internees settled in the United States. Some say 50, some many more. About a dozen remained in the Northwest.
I met my wife after when I joined the San Francisco Xavier church choir. And one day she heard me sing, la 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 la, and she come over, she said, oh, a beautiful, che bella voce. She say in Italian. It was the first time I hear somebody speak Italian since I was in Missoula.
I went to school. I thought I gonna be, I told you, I talk about man, but I never did. I ended up in Spokane, and I went out dancing. I got stuck with my wife there, and now it's 50 years.
John Pillay took his citizenship test in 1949. He answered every question correctly. Then the examiner brought out his Fort Missoula file.
He said, you remember so-and-so, the day so-and-so, Ellis Island? You know, you say, Italy's going to win the war. I said, yep. And he said, what did it make to do that? He said, because they're making me believe we're going to win the war. So finally, the judge got fed up with him. And he might have fed, he was an Italian guy too. The judge called by the name, he said, let me ask you a question. He said, you put yourself on this kid, this German shoes, and he said, 16 years old. He said, what are you going to say? He told me, get up. He said, I'm satisfied. And I got my citizenship paper.
Some former internees and their families refused to participate in this project, reluctant to be singled out of the typical immigrant experience.
Are you like to somebody come over, put you in jail, no. You think you were feeling happy or something? No, no way. But at the same time, I don't know. I think we are lucky too. Then we landed for Missoula. If I was going back in Italy, I don't know what was happened to me.
We had a wonderful friendship. You know, we're just like brothers, just as close as they can be.
If we were over there during the war, nobody knows what could happen. You see the picture, you see the movie, you see what was going on over there, what disaster, what the messy stuff.
Yeah, one thing I miss is the ocean, yeah. I even love the smell of the ocean. That's why I come up here, see, because I can see the water there. Yeah.
Bella Vista. Beautiful view. That's what it is.
That's what I mean in Italian. Bella Vista means beautiful view.
You know, a lot of people in this country, they take this country for granted. And, you know, but I'm concerned. I said, don't do that, because that's a no-no.
Yeah.
You know, don't expect something for nothing. You know, in this country, you be honest, you work hard, you can do anything, make out of yourself.
Yes,
you can do anything you want to.
I think this country is one of the best countries in the whole world. I've been all over the world, 7 times all over the world. I think America is the best.
I see I got 2 birthdays. So you have only one. So, the American birthday and an Italian birthday,
All the time I say that this was the luckiest break that I had in my life, to end it up over here in this country.
In a lifetime, you never know what's ahead of you. You know, you take what they give you. You know what I mean? So it could be better, it could be worse. So we don't know that. But I'm happy what we've done in our lifestyle.
You can order your own video copy of this program for $24.95 plus $4 shipping and handling by calling 1-800-735-2377.